Hi, everyone. We are here kind of doing a slightly different Facebook Live than what we usually do because we have Shruti joining us here and she is not in Texas. So we had to Skype her in. And so we are very excited to have her here. And I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Colleen. As Colleen mentioned, my name is Shruti Tekwani, and I identify myself in several different ways. First and foremost, I am a Sib. My little sister is 4 years younger than me, and she's 32 years old and born with cerebral palsy. And we live in the Caribbean, a little island called Curacao, and we moved here from India when we were both little, and we live with my parents. And I am a licensed mental health counselor by trade, licensed in Massachusetts, but I focus really on grief and trauma loss. And I do most of my work online. So this is very comfortable for me because this is an average day for me to be on the computer. I also do a lot of workshops and presentations, a lot of trainings based on something called choice theory, which helps you understand human behavior. And I'll talk about it a little bit later on as well. And it's kind of how I navigate how I view the world and how I look at things. And that's pretty much how I spend my time. I am on a few boards of directors. Some of them are international, so that keeps me busy and traveling as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time to be here with us. So, our November theme at the Texas Sibling Network is self-care. So we're really trying to focus in on what does self-care mean and not like the commercial bubble baths and pedicures, but like what does it really mean to take care of ourselves as siblings, especially around holiday times, which kind of tend to bring a lot of things up for people and can be really challenging for some people during this time. So I guess just first off, if you just want to tell us a little bit about, I mean, when you define self-care, like what does that definition look like for you?
So when I do talk about self-care, and I tell people all the time, it's not just bubble baths, it's not just getting a manicure. That's part of it, but I feel like sometimes that can just be the band-aid to getting to what really makes us tick, because that is self-care. It's survival, but not just surviving. You're thriving, you're enjoying your life, you're living your best life. To me, that is what self-care means. But more than that, especially as a sib, it means putting your own needs first. And that's really counterintuitive to a lot of sibs because some of us don't, we feel like we don't have that option.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us with kids, with sibs, we feel like, well, I have to put their needs first because this is what I signed up for and this is my role. But I ask them to think about the analogy. I'm sure everyone's heard this by now, but the analogy of being on an airplane when the oxygen mask drops, if you don't put yours on first, everyone's in trouble potentially, because if you stop to put someone else's on and you pass out, that person's maybe going to be okay, but then you're not there anymore to take care of them. Mm-hmm. And especially with SIBs and those of us who are caretakers, it's so important because if we're responsible for their care, if we don't take care of ourselves and we get injured or we get sick or even have a mental breakdown, then who takes care of them? And that's a big deal. Yeah. So I like to talk about that airplane analogy a lot because it's so relevant, and I'm an aviation buff myself, so it kind of sits with me. But more than that, I think it goes back to what every person is made up of. And by that, I mean their basic needs. So earlier on, I mentioned that I practice choice theory a lot. And the person who developed choice theory and their ideas is Dr. Glasser. And some of you may have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the triangle and what you start off with and how you kind of move up the triangle. Dr. Glasser's needs are slightly different in the sense that there are 5 basic needs that everybody has, and there's no rank, there's no order, everybody just has them, but some of us have more of a need than others in certain areas. So for example, there's the survival need, which is your average, your basic food and water, your shelter, your security, safety. Mm-hmm. There's love, belonging, and connection. So that's the need to to feel connected to someone, to have a relationship with them, to just feel like you're loved and wanted. The third one is freedom, autonomy, the ability to make choices. The fourth one is fun, because we all need that, and that is a psychological need. And then the fifth one is power, not to be confused with control, but that's a feeling of, my voice is being heard. I have a voice in the world. I matter. I have significance. So when you think about those 5 basic needs, for me, self-care means meeting those needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, it's the reason I say it's a little bit different than Maslow is that you don't have to go through one stage to get to another. They're all 5 needs that are there in every human being, but some of us have higher needs in certain areas. For example, my biggest need is love and belonging, hands down. And that can actually get me in trouble, because the choices that I make and how I choose to spend my time and what I do with my life is constantly feeding that need. But I'm also an introvert. So I'm constantly choosing love, belonging, connection, time with people I love, and wanting to do and serve the people I love. But then that leaves me with nothing for myself. So this topic is really precious to me because it's been a lot of self-practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important for siblings to know, and to really, I think a big part of this is just knowing yourself. I think that's step number 1, to know what parts are, like you said, more important to you, and also taking a look at really hard look and seeing, well, what parts are not being met. I had someone recently use an analogy of like a watering can, and like you only have so much water in your can, and you have so many cups, and sometimes you have to pour from this cup into that cup. But at the end of the day, there isn't any more water. Like
you can't pour from an empty can. Exactly. And I'm so glad you said knowing yourself, because I tell people, know yourself and know your needs. Know which one is the most important to you. Know which one you need the most of. Because for me, if I'm a high love and belonging person, my natural instinct will be to say yes to anybody who asks me to do anything, especially when it comes to my sibling. If my parents say, can you please watch her, for while we go take a nap or while we go grocery shopping or whatever it is, my automatic response is going to be yes, because I'm a love and belonging person. I want to please and I want to spend time with her. And I forget the other needs. I forget the freedom. I forget the power, which is mostly related to work, for me anyway. And that kind of gets put aside. So when I think about self-care, it really, really is a matter of getting in the habit of asking yourself, what have I agreed to do? What am I doing? And what need is it feeding? And I can find that can really balance things and kind of ground you into the choices that you're making.
Yeah. I mean, I think those 3 questions kind of heading into the holiday season are especially important, because I know a lot of times it's when families gather for maybe the only time in the whole year that everyone's together. And so sometimes emotions can run high, and just a lot of aspects that go into that.
Right. And with that, it's also realizing and being aware of the fact that sometimes we choose certain things over other things. Like if you are somebody who goes to the gym 3 times a week and that's your you time, that's the time that you use to process and just kind of deal with life. But because of the holidays, you're choosing other holiday activities, or you're choosing to spend time with family instead of going to the gym. That's going to have an impact on you, because that's a need you're used to fulfilling. And so all of a sudden, it's kind of a double whammy. Not only are you not getting that need met, but you're also replacing it with additional, I don't want to call them stressors, but sometimes they're stressors. Sometimes being around family when you're not used to it is stressful, whether it's the conversation at the dinner table, whether it's the questions you're being asked, whether it's the pressure that you feel yourself or the family's putting on you. And then there's the food that you're eating as well. That can have a lot to do with how we feel physically and emotionally. So not only are you not doing your regular routine, but you're adding other stuff that you're just not used to handling.
Mhm.
And that can be a recipe for disaster if you're not careful.
It can be. So, what are some tips you would give to our siblings kind of heading into the holiday season?
First and foremost, know yourself, know your needs, recognize what you are. Know if you are somebody who you are most satisfied when you're done with a work project or when you're fueling yourself at work. Maybe you're a high power need person. And really, there's no one right need over another. There's no such thing as, well, that's a dangerous need or that's a wrong need.
Mm-hmm.
It's individual and it's personal. So whatever works for everybody works for them. We're nobody to judge, but knowing what your needs are can be so helpful and not as frustrating. When you just don't feel good, you just feel like if one more person calls me today or if one more thing happens today, I'm just going to blow.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you know your needs aren't being met.
Yeah.
That's the trigger. And so if you can recognize, like, you know what, this week I haven't had any freedom. I haven't had any choices. Everything's been decided for me. Okay, we can understand why you're feeling that way. And then you have a little bit more patience with yourself as well. And I think your relationship with self is the most important one before you can start in with the sibs or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the number one tip. Another tip, I know that around the holidays, it really comes up a lot. Gratitude is a huge, huge thing that I find that ties into self-care a lot, because there's research that shows it rewires the brain into happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there are gratitude challenges going around on social media during the holidays. With Thanksgiving, it is all about gratitude and being
Yes, absolutely.
thankful. Sometimes community service can really help. And just kind of knowing and forgiving yourself for not always being the perfect person or for being the perfect sib, and being grateful for your own role in your sib's life can make a huge difference as well. And releasing yourself from the expectation of being perfect or from that picture you had in your head of what you should be,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
coming to terms with what is and being grateful for what it is at this moment can be huge, because then you're not putting stress on yourself of what it should be.
Yeah, I think that's a really big one. Letting
So
letting go of that idea of what perfect is.
right, and being grateful and kind of acknowledging what is.
Yeah.
Another one, it kind of, everyone knows this, but people don't really practice it, is sleep. I know for me, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm not a functioning person and I can't make decisions. I'm more emotional. I'm not thinking rationally. I'm crabby. I don't want to do that around the holidays or ever.
Mm-hmm.
Not as a sib, not with my family, ever. I never want to do that. So kind of watching also around the holidays what you're eating, drinking, the caffeine that you're taking in might be a little extra sugary, and that can affect your sleep as well. So making sure you get the sleep, but also not taking in stuff that's going to delay sleep or wake you up in the middle of the night would be helpful. Another one is to feel your feelings, because again, the holidays can come with so many emotions, not only as sibs, but sometimes we tend to think of the holidays or seasonal changes as a benchmark or a calendar. Like, oh, last year, I was single in my 30s, and this year I'm single in my 30s. Nothing's changed. And we tend to kind of beat ourselves up over it. And that can be a marker in our heads, and that can be pretty damaging to ourselves and how we feel. And then there's the pressure, right? Of if you go to Christmas dinner and you see all your cousins and they have partners and you're not with a partner, that can also feel pretty bad. And then especially as a sib, especially if you're one that you've kind of sacrificed a lot of time to take care of your sib and be a caretaker, sometimes those feelings of resentment can come up, or
Yeah.
even feelings of resentment that you can't partake in the things that you normally want to partake in. So
Yeah.
um,
Awesome.
that
And
feeling your feelings and kind of acknowledging where you're at is important.
And how do we give ourselves permission to forgive, to have this me time? Because I think a lot of people, that's like the first step in kind of starting this process. So how do we as siblings even take that first step?
Well, I think recognizing that this image that we have in our heads of what we should be, being real with ourselves and asking ourselves, is this realistic? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And kind of similar to new parents who feel, if I leave my baby for 1 minute, I'm a bad parent. Realizing that, I'm going to go with another analogy here, but when you are swimming with somebody in the deep ocean, you have to be a strong swimmer if they can't swim. Because if you try to save somebody in the deep ocean and you're trying to swim with them, they're going to drown you if they're kicking and flailing, and they're going to put you underwater. So if anytime you are in charge of someone else's care, or even if you're not, even if it's just you and you're responsible for yourself, realizing that you are going to break at some point if you don't take care of yourself. So you have the choice of now or later when it becomes an emergency. And that's actually one of the other tips that I usually give people, is take care of yourself before it becomes an emergency and you have a breakdown or something physical happens to your health, because it does come out that way sometimes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've kind of have seen firsthand with some of our older siblings how this has impacted them and in their lives.
When you don't take care of it, it tends to take care of it itself, and then you don't have as much choice of when and how. So while it's in your control, and another piece of advice is be proactive in the self-care. Don't wait for it to trigger, like, okay, I feel like I'm not myself. Do it consistently before it becomes an issue.
Yeah, getting that self-care routine down from a very
right, whatever that means to you.
Yeah.
Really
awesome, Shruti. We're kind of getting close to the end here. Say our siblings wanted to find you, where do you have a Facebook or Instagram? I don't know.
Yeah, I have both, and I have a website. And actually, I've talked a lot about basic needs. And if SIBs are wondering, well, how do I know what I am? I can actually send them a free assessment on figuring out what their basic need is. They can email me at Shruti, SHRUTI, at thrivecorp.org. So it's THRIVECORP.org. And I'm happy to share resources with them, assessments with them. And if they want to talk, if they want to chat, I do counseling online as well, and coaching. So if they're not interested in counseling, that's fine as well. But that's how they would reach me.
Awesome. It's unique to find like a sibling perspective for a counselor. So I think you're a really great resource to our community.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us here today. And Shruti will be joining us next month for part 2 of this conversation, where we'll talk a bit more about boundaries, and we might touch on some grief aspects of being a sibling. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Colleen, and have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you.